I'm so sorry, but this letter proves they sold the truth about who you really are. No, I can't believe it.
I found out my family sold my old Bible the same way you find out a stranger has been living in your house too late, and without your permission. It was the only thing my mother ever left me, and to them, it was just clutter. But 3 days later, a man knocked on my door. He held that Bible in his hands, like it weighed more than truth itself. He looked at me and said quietly, "There's something inside this book your family was never supposed to find." And in that moment, I realized they hadn't just sold a book. They might have sold the truth about who I really am. If this story pulls at something in your heart, I'd really love for you to stay with me. Like the video, subscribe if you believe family stories matter, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. I have always believed that the things we keep say more about us than the things we let go. That Bible worn at the edges, its leather softened by decades of hands and time, was never just a book to me. It sat quietly on the same corner of my bedside table for as long as I could remember, like it had chosen its place and refused to leave. Even when I moved houses, even when life rearranged itself in ways I didn't expect, that Bible stayed exactly where it belonged. And yet somehow, it had ended up in a stranger's hands. I was sitting in my living room that afternoon, staring at it again, as if it might disappear if I blinked too long. The man, Michael Turner, had already left after returning it, but his words lingered in the air like something unfinished. "There's something inside this book your family was never supposed to find." I ran my fingers over the cover again, slower this time. It looked exactly the same. Same faint crease near the spine. Same small stain on the lower corner coffee, I think, from years ago. Nothing about it suggested secrets. Nothing about it suggested betrayal. But then again, neither had my family. "You're overthinking this," Rebecca's voice echoed in my head, though she wasn't in the room. She had said that to me more times than I could count. It was her favorite way of ending conversations she didn't want to have. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a long breath. 3 weeks ago, I had been in the hospital. Nothing dramatic, just a fall in the kitchen that turned into a precautionary stay. At least that's what they told me. Rebecca insisted it was better for me to rest, to let doctors run tests, to be safe. What she didn't tell me was that while I was lying in that hospital bed, staring at unfamiliar ceilings and listening to machines beep through the night, she and her husband were in my house, sorting, deciding, removing, selling. It wasn't until I came home that I noticed the emptiness. At first, it was small things. A porcelain dish missing from the hallway table. The old lamp in the guest room replaced with something modern and cold. I remember standing in that doorway, feeling like I had walked into someone else's home. "Rebecca!" I had called out, confusion already creeping into my voice. She appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel like everything was perfectly normal. "Oh, good, you're up," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I was just making you some tea." I didn't return the smile. "Where are my things?" She hesitated for just a second. "Just long enough. We cleaned up a little," she said casually. "You had a lot of clutter, Mom. Things you don't really need anymore." Clutter. That word hit harder than it should have. "My things are not clutter," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Mark stepped in, then leaning casually against the counter, like he had been waiting for his cue. "We just thought it'd be easier for you," he added. "Less stuff to worry about. Easier." Another word that didn't belong to me. I remember walking through the house after that, room by room, trying to figure out what was gone. It wasn't just objects. It was pieces of my life quietly erased without my permission. But I didn't realize the Bible was missing until that night. I had reached for it out of habit, the same way I always did before bed. My hand touched empty wood instead of leather. I froze. I checked the drawer, the nightstand, the closet. Every place it could have been moved to. Nothing. Rebecca! I called louder this time. She came upstairs slowly like she already knew what I was going to ask. Where is my Bible? There it was again, that hesitation. Oh, that old thing, she said almost dismissively. We sold it with some of the other books. It was falling apart, Mom. Falling apart. I stared at her, trying to understand how she could say that so easily. That Bible belonged to my mother, I said, my voice shaking now, despite my effort to keep it steady. Rebecca sighed, crossing her arms. I know, but it's just a book. You can get another one. Just a book. I felt something shift inside me in that moment, not loud, not dramatic, but deep. Like a quiet crack forming somewhere I couldn't reach. You don't replace something like that, I said, softly. Mark stepped in again, his tone a little sharper this time. Look, Josephine, we were trying to help. You can't keep holding on to every little thing forever. Every little thing. That's what it had become to them. Not a memory, not a connection, not a piece of history. Just a thing. I didn't argue after that. What would have been the point? They had already made their decision. But now, sitting here with that same Bible back in my hands, I couldn't stop thinking about everything they didn't understand, or maybe everything they never cared to. I opened the cover slowly. The pages still smelled faintly of age paper and time, something almost comforting. I flipped through them carefully, my fingers brushing over familiar passages, notes written in the margins in my mother's handwriting. Josephine Emerson. She had always been a quiet woman, not cold, just reserved. There were parts of her life she never spoke about, no matter how many times I asked. Some things are better left where they are, she used to say. At the time, I thought she meant memories that hurt too much. Now I wasn't so sure. I paused as something caught my eye. Near the back cover, the binding looked slightly uneven. Not torn, not damaged, just different. My heart skipped. I leaned closer, running my finger along the edge. There was a slight gap, a space that shouldn't have been there. I swallowed slowly, suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick more loudly each. The wall seemed to tick more loudly each second, stretching longer than the last. Michael's voice echoed in my mind again. There's something inside this book. My hands trembled as I carefully pressed against the binding. For a moment, nothing happened. Then second, stretching longer than the last. Michael's voice echoed in my mind again. There's something inside this book. My hands trembled as I carefully pressed against the binding. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, something shifted. A thin piece of paper slid just slightly into view. I froze. I didn't pull it out right away, because somehow, deep down, I already knew. Whatever was written on that page was going to change everything I thought I knew about my life. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I was ready to know the truth. I stared at that thin piece of paper for what felt like an hour before I finally gathered the courage to touch it. It wasn't just fear that held me back. It was something deeper, something quieter. The kind of instinct that whispers to you when you're standing at the edge of a truth you can't unlearn. Once you know, you can't unknow. My fingers hovered over the edge of the hidden paper, trembling slightly. I told myself to stop being ridiculous. It was just a letter. Just ink on paper. Something left behind decades ago. But my heart didn't believe that. My heart knew better. Carefully, so carefully, I almost laughed at myself. I slid the paper free from the binding. It came loose easier than I expected, like it had been waiting. The paper was older than the pages around it. Yellowed, fragile, folded twice edges worn from time, but not torn. Whoever hid it had done so with intention, with care, with secrecy. I held it between my hands, noticing how light it felt. Strange, I thought. Something that weighs almost nothing can still carry a lifetime inside it. I hesitated again before unfolding it. Don't do this, a small voice in my head warned. Just put it back. You don't need to know. But another voice, stronger this time, pushed forward. You've already lost too much not to know. I swallowed and slowly unfolded the letter. The handwriting hit me first. I had seen it before, but not often. Not in the Bible, not in my mother's belongings, but somewhere long ago. It was firm, deliberate, slightly slanted. A man's handwriting, I realized. At the top of the page, there was no greeting, no name, just a date. June 14th, 1957. My breath caught. I didn't need to do the math. I already knew. That was the year I was born. My eyes dropped to the first line. I don't know if this will ever reach you, but I have to try. My chest tightened instantly. This wasn't just a letter. This was a goodbye. I continued reading slower now, each word pressing deeper into me. They told me it would be easier this way, that some truths only bring pain. But I cannot live with the thought that my child will grow up never knowing who he truly is. They told me it would be easier this way, that some truths only bring pain. But I cannot live with the thought that my child will grow up never knowing who he truly is. He. My hands stiffened. My heart skipped hard, sharp, like it had tripped over something invisible. I read the line again. My child, never knowing who he truly is. He. The word echoed in my mind wrong and out of place. I was a girl. I had always been a girl. Hadn't I? A strange chill crept over me. I shook my head slightly, trying to dismiss the thought. Maybe it was just the way people wrote back then. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But something inside me had already begun to shift. I forced myself to keep reading. I loved you more than I was allowed to show, more than they would ever understand. They said I had no right to be part of this child's life, that it would ruin everything, your future, their reputation, the life they had planned for you. My throat tightened. They, who were they? And so they took that choice away from me. I felt my fingers press harder into the paper. They told me you would be safer without me. That the child would be raised in a home where no one would ask Nahum, where no one would ask questions. My vision blurred slightly, and I realized I had stopped breathing properly. A home where no one would ask questions. That line, it didn't just sound familiar. It felt familiar. I remembered my mother's voice. Some things are better left where they are. I swallowed hard and continued. But I need you to know this, even if you never read these words. That child, our child, is mine. And I will carry that truth for the rest of my life, even if I am never allowed to say it out loud. Our child. The room felt smaller, quieter, heavier. I sat there frozen as the meaning slowly, painfully began to take shape. This wasn't just a letter. This was a confession. And suddenly, Michael Turner's words came rushing back to me. The letter wasn't written to you. No, it wasn't. It was written to my mother, Eleanor Emerson. My hands began to shake. I looked down at the signature at the bottom of the page. The name I had been avoiding. The name I already knew was there before I even saw it. Charles Whitaker. The air left my lungs in a slow, unsteady breath. Whitaker. I had never heard that name in my house. Not once. Not in conversation. Not in passing. Not even in anger or regret. It had never existed in my world until now. I stared at it, my mind racing. Charles Whitaker. Who was he? Why had my mother never mentioned him? Why had she hidden this letter? And the question that hit me hardest of all, why did this feel like it had everything to do with me? A sudden knock at the door made me jump. The letter slipped slightly in my hands. My heart pounded as I looked toward the hallway. No one ever came by unannounced anymore. Not at my age. Not in this house. Another knock. Slower this time. More deliberate. I folded the letter quickly, almost instinctively, and held it tightly in my hand. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something told me I already knew who it was. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me, and walked toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time I reached it, my hand hovered over the handle for just a second. Then I opened it. Michael Turner stood there exactly as I remembered him. Calm. Composed. Watching me carefully. Like he had been waiting for this moment. "I'm sorry to come back," he said quietly. "But I had a feeling you'd find it." My grip tightened around the letter. "You knew," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. I stepped aside without thinking. "Come in." He hesitated, then walked inside his eyes, scanning the room briefly before settling back on me. I closed the door behind him, suddenly aware of how alone we were. "How long have you known about this?" I asked, holding up the folded letter. Michael exhaled slowly. "Not long," he admitted, "but long enough to recognize the name." My heart skipped again. "Whitaker," he nodded. "Yes." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What does that mean?" I asked. He studied me for a moment, like he was choosing his words carefully. "It means," he said slowly, "that the man who wrote that letter might not just be part of your past. A pause, a breath, a truth waiting to land. He might be part of mine, too." Everything inside me went still. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a hidden letter anymore. It was about a connection neither of us had been prepared to find. And whatever truth was buried in that past, it was just beginning to come to the surface. I didn't sit down right away. For a moment, I just stood there in my own living room, holding that letter like it might burn me if I gripped it too tightly. Michael remained near the doorway, watching me. Not impatient, not intrusive, just present. Like he understood that whatever came next wasn't something to rush. I finally walked back toward the chair and lowered myself into it slowly, my knees weaker than I wanted to admit. The letter was still in my hand. Charles Whitaker. The name echoed louder now, no longer distant or unfamiliar. It had weight, presence, a quiet authority that demanded to be acknowledged. "I don't understand," I said more to myself than to Michael. Why would my mother hide something like this? Michael didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved a few steps closer. careful, respectful of the space between us. People don't hide things without a reason, he said gently, especially not something like this. I looked up at him, my eyes searching his face. And what kind of reason could justify this? I asked. Hiding a father. Hiding a truth like this. He held my gaze for a moment, then exhaled slowly. The kind that involves fear, he said. Or shame. Or protection. Protection. That word landed differently. I looked back down at the letter, reading parts of it again, slower this time, as if the meaning might shift if I gave it enough attention. They told me it would be easier this way. They said I had no right. They took that choice away from me. I pressed my lips together. They, I whispered. Who are they? Michael shook his head slightly. That's what we need to find out. The word didn't go unnoticed. I glanced back at him. You keep saying we, I said, carefully. But you still haven't told me why this matters to you. He didn't seem surprised by the question. If anything, he looked like he had been expecting it. You're right, he said. I owe you that. He pulled out a chair across from me and sat down, leaning forward slightly, his hands clasped together. My family has been researching our genealogy for years, he began. It started with my father. He was obsessed with tracing our roots, understanding where we came from. I listened, my grip tightening slightly on the letter. And Charles Whitaker, I asked. Michael nodded. He was part of that search. My father believed Charles was his grandfather. My breath caught. Believed there were gaps, Michael explained. Missing records, contradictions, names that appeared and disappeared in different documents. It never quite lined up. A chill ran through me. Until now, I said quietly. He gave a small, somber nod. Until now. The room fell into silence again, heavier this time. I leaned back slightly, trying to process what he was saying. If Charles Whitaker is your grandfather, I said slowly, choosing each word carefully, and he wrote this letter to my mother. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. Michael did it for me. Then there's a possibility, he said, his voice steady but softer now, that we're connected. Connected? The word felt too small for what it implied. I shook my head slightly, almost instinctively. No, I said. That doesn't make sense. I would have known. My mother would have told me. But even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. Would she have told me? She hadn't told me about Charles. She hadn't told me about the letter. She hadn't told me. But even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. Would she have told me? She hadn't told me about Charles. She hadn't told me about the letter. She hadn't told me anything. You said earlier your mother didn't talk much about the past, Michael reminded me gently. I let out a quiet breath. She didn't, I admitted, but I thought it was just because it hurt, not because she was hiding something like this. Michael leaned back slightly, giving me space again. Sometimes those two things are the same, he said. I closed my eyes for a moment. Images of my mother began to surface. Small moments, quiet ones. Her sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window longer than she needed to. The way she would change the subject whenever I asked about my father. The hesitation in her voice when I pressed too hard. I had always interpreted those moments as grief. Now they felt like something else. Secrets. I need to know the truth, I said, opening my eyes again. Michael nodded immediately. I know. I looked down at the Bible again, running my fingers along the pages, searching for anything else that might have been hidden. There has to be more, I said. My mother wouldn't just leave one letter. Not if it meant this much. Michael watched as I flipped through the pages more carefully this time. Sometimes people leave clues without realizing it, he said. Patterns, notes, small details that don't seem important until you know what to look for. Patterns. Notes. I paused. There were markings in the Bible. I had seen them my whole life. Small underlines, tiny notes in the margins written in my mother's delicate handwriting. At the time, they had seemed like nothing more than reflections. Personal thoughts tied to scripture. But now, I leaned forward, flipping back through the pages more deliberately. Here, I said, suddenly pointing to a passage. Michael leaned closer. What is it? She underlined this, I said, my voice tightening slightly. The verse read, For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be made known and brought out into the open. I felt my chest tighten. That doesn't feel like a coincidence anymore, I whispered. Michael didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached out and gently turned a few more pages. There's more, he said quietly. I followed his hand. Another note, another underline, another passage about truth, about hidden things, about revelation. My pulse quickened. She knew, I said. She knew this would come out someday. Michael nodded slowly. It looks that way. I swallowed, my mind racing. If she knew, I said, my voice barely steady now, then she must have left something else, something more direct. I closed the Bible and held it tightly, pressing it lightly against my chest. A strange mix of fear and determination settled inside me. Think I murmured to myself. Where would she hide something important? Michael stayed quiet, letting me work through it. I closed my eyes again, searching through memories. My mother's routines, her habits, the way she organized things. And then something surfaced. A memory so small I almost missed it. A visit to the bank. I opened my eyes quickly. She had a safety deposit box, I said. Michael leaned forward. Are you sure? I nodded, more certain now. Yes. I remember going with her once when I was younger. She told me it was for important things, things she didn't want to lose. Michael's expression shifted, slightly more focused now, more intent. Do you still have access to it? I hesitated. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't thought about it in years, but if you do, he said carefully, that might be where she kept the rest of it. The rest of it. The truth. I looked down at the Bible one more time, then back at the letter in my hand. Charles Whitaker. My mother. A hidden past. And now, a door that might finally open. I took a slow, steady breath. Then that's where we're going, I said. Because whatever my mother had hidden all those years ago, I was finally ready to uncover it. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in bed, with the Bible beside me. The letter folded carefully and placed between its pages again, as if returning it, there might somehow restore the balance of things. But nothing felt balanced anymore. Nothing felt certain. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's face. Not as she was at the end of her life, fragile and quiet, but as she had been when I was a child. Strong, composed, controlled in a way that made you feel safe, but also kept you at a distance. How much had she known, and how much had she chosen not to tell me? I turned onto my side, staring at the faint glow of the clock on my nightstand. 3:17 a.m. I hadn't looked at the time in hours. My mind kept circling the same thought over and over again. If this letter is real, then everything I believed about my father might be wrong. I sat up slowly, the realization hitting me harder the longer I stayed still. I had spent my entire life with a version of the truth that now felt incomplete. My father, at least the man I had always called my father, was Robert Emerson, a quiet man, kind in his own distant way. He worked long hours, spoke little, and rarely showed affection in the way other fathers did. But he was there, always there, or at least I thought he was. But now I swung my legs off the bed and stood up the floor cold beneath my feet. Something didn't add up. If Charles Whitaker had written that letter, if he had believed I was his child, then what did that make Robert A. lie? A cover, or something more complicated. I walked out of my bedroom and down the hallway. My movements slow, but determined. The house felt different in the dark, like it was holding its breath with me. The closet at the end of the hall creaked softly as I opened it. Inside, tucked behind boxes and old winter coats, was a small worn container I hadn't touched in years. My personal records, birth certificates, old documents, things I kept not because I used them, but because I needed to know they were there. I pulled the box out and carried it back to the living room, setting it carefully on the coffee table. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it. Then I opened it. The papers inside were exactly as I remembered, neatly stacked, carefully preserved, untouched by time, at least on the surface. I sifted through them slowly until I found what I was looking for. My birth certificate. My hands tightened slightly as I lifted it. I had seen it before, of course, many times, but never like this. Never with questions already forming before I even read it. I sat down and placed it in front of me. Josephine Emerson, born August 3rd, 1957. Mother, Eleanor Emerson. Father, Robert Emerson. I stared at the name. Robert Emerson. It looked right. It had always looked right. But now, it felt like something written to be believed, not something proven. I leaned closer. That's when I saw it. A faint irregularity near the father's name. So subtle, I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking for something wrong. The ink wasn't consistent. The spacing was slightly off, as if it had been altered. My breath caught in my throat. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not possible." But my eyes didn't move. I ran my finger gently over the name. Robert Emerson. Had it always been there, or had it been placed there? A slow, creeping realization settled over me. What if this wasn't the original? What if this was the version they wanted me to see? I sat back, my heart pounding louder now, each beat echoing through the quiet room. My entire life had been built on this document, on this identity, on this name. And now, with one small inconsistency, it all felt fragile, unstable, like something that could collapse if I pushed just a little harder. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly. Rebecca stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression tight. "How long have you been up?" she asked, her voice edged with irritation. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I held up the birth certificate. Did you know about this? I asked. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Know about what? This, I said, my voice firmer now. This doesn't look right. She stepped into the room, glancing at the paper. It's your birth certificate, Mom. What's not right about it? I stood up, walking closer to her. The name, I said. The ink. It looks like it was changed. She let out a short breath, almost a laugh. You're really going to start questioning your own birth certificate now. This isn't a joke, Rebecca, I said sharply. She rolled her eyes slightly, the same dismissive gesture she had used countless times before. Ever since that man showed up, you've been acting like everything is some kind of mystery, she said. It's not. It's just she said. It's not. It's just an old book and some old paper. Stop calling it that, I snapped. She froze for a moment, surprised by the tone in my voice. Why does it matter so much? She shot back. Why are you digging into things that don't need to be dug into book and some old paper? Stop calling it that, I snapped. She froze for a moment, surprised by the tone in my voice. Why does it matter so much? She shot back. Why are you digging into things that don't need to be dug into? Because they were buried, I wanted to say. Because someone buried them. Instead, I held her gaze. Because I think I've been lied to, I said, quietly. The words hung in the air between us. Rebecca's expression shifted, just slight why. Not guilt, not yet. But something. Because I think I've been lied to, I said, quietly. The words hung in the air between us. Rebecca's expression shifted, just slightly. Not guilt, not yet, but something uncomfortable. You're overreacting, she said, though her voice wasn't as steady as before. Am I asked? I held up the letter. Did you know about this too? Her eyes flicked to it, then away. No. Too quick. Too easy. I felt it immediately. You didn't even ask what it is, I said. She didn't respond. Silence. Heavy. Telling. My heart sank. Rebecca, I said slowly, what did Grandma tell you? Her jaw tightened. Nothing, she said. Another lie. I could hear it now. Clear as day. I took a step closer. Don't do this, I said softly. Not now. Not when everything is already falling apart. She looked at me, her expression conflicted. For a moment, I thought she might finally say something, finally tell the truth. But instead, she shook her head. I don't know anything, she repeated. And just like that, the distance between us grew wider than it had ever been. I lowered my hand slowly, the letter still clutched in my fingers. Fine. If she wasn't going to help me find the truth, then I would find it myself. I looked back down at the birth certificate, then at the Bible resting on the table, and suddenly, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't just about the past anymore. This was about identity, about who I was, about who I had always been told I was, and whether any of it had ever been real. The next morning felt unreal. Not in a dramatic, overwhelming way, but in that quiet, unsettling sense that the world had shifted slightly while you weren't looking. The walls were the same. The furniture hadn't moved. The sunlight came through the same window at the same angle. But nothing felt the same. I stood in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. It had gone cold minutes ago, but I hadn't noticed. All I could think about was one thing: the safety deposit box. My mother had taken me there once. I couldn't remember the exact year, but I remembered the feeling. I had been young, old enough to be curious, too young to be told anything meaningful. "Important things go here," she had said, her voice calm but firm. "What kind of important things?" I had asked. She had smiled slightly, but there had been something behind it, something guarded. "The kind you don't want anyone to lose," she replied. At the time, I thought she meant jewelry, documents, ordinary things. Now I knew better. I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't need to look out the window to know who it was. Michael. He had said he would come early. I hadn't told Rebecca. I didn't want another argument. Not today. Not when I was this close to something that felt final. The knock on the door came gently this time. Not urgent, not intrusive, just steady. I walked over and opened it. Michael stood there, dressed simply, his expression serious, but not tense. He looked like a man who understood the weight of the day ahead. "Good morning," he said. I nodded. "Come in." He stepped inside, glancing around briefly as if taking in the space again, but his attention quickly returned to me. "Are you ready?" he asked. I hesitated, not because I wasn't sure, but because I knew there was no turning back after this. "I think so," I said quietly. We didn't waste time. Within minutes, we were in his car, driving toward the bank my mother used all those years ago. The ride was quiet, not awkward, but thoughtful. Heavy in a way that didn't need words. I watched the road ahead, my hands folded tightly in my lap. "What do you think we'll find?" I asked finally. Michael didn't answer right away. "I think," he said slowly, "we'll find whatever your mother wasn't ready to tell you herself." I let that settle. It made sense, but it didn't make it easier. We pulled into the parking lot just before opening hours. The building looked exactly as I remembered, unchanged, solid, indifferent to the lives that passed through it. Inside, everything felt sterile, clean, quiet. A woman behind the counter greeted us politely. "How can I help you today?" I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the tension in my chest. "My name is Josephine Emerson," I said. "My mother, Eleanor Emerson, had a safety deposit box here. I'd like to access it." The woman's expression shifted slightly, more professional now, more focused. "Do you have identification?" she asked. I handed it over without hesitation. She examined it, then typed something into her computer. There was a pause. A long one. "Yes," she said finally. "There is a box registered under that name. Are you listed as an authorized party?" I hesitated. I don't know." She checked again, scrolling through something on her screen. Then she looked up. "You are," she said. My breath caught. I hadn't known. But somehow, my mother had prepared for this. "Please follow me," the woman said, standing up. Michael and I exchanged a brief glance before following her down a narrow hallway. Each step echoed softly against the floor, the sound sharper than it should have been. We reached a secure door. She unlocked it with a keycard, then led us into a smaller room lined with metal boxes. Rows and rows of them, each one holding someone's version of important. She stopped in front of one and pulled out a key. "This is it," she said. She unlocked the box and carefully slid it out, placing it on a small table in the center of the room. "I'll give you some privacy," she added before stepping out and closing the door behind her. The silence that followed was immediate, heavy, final. I stood there staring at the box. It wasn't large, just a simple metal container. Nothing about it suggested the weight of what it might hold, but I could feel it. That quiet pull again. That sense of standing on the edge of something that would change everything. Michael didn't move. He stayed where he was, giving me the space to take the first step. I appreciated that. Because this wasn't his moment. It was mine. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing against the cool surface of the box. Then, with a steady breath, I opened it. Inside, there were only a few items. Not stacks of documents. Not valuables. Just a small collection of carefully placed things. A leather-bound journal. A sealed envelope. And a small rectangular case. My heart began to race. This was it. This was what my mother had hidden away, what she had protected, what she had never spoken about. I reached for the envelope first. It had my name on it, Josephine, written in my mother's handwriting. My chest tightened instantly. She knew, I whispered. Michael stepped a little closer, his voice quiet. She planned for this, he said. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I picked up the envelope. For a moment, I didn't open it. I just held it. Because in that simple act, I felt closer to my mother than I had in years. Closer than I had felt even when she was alive. I'm ready, I said softly, more to myself than to anyone else. Then I opened it. Inside was a single letter. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was newer than the one in the Bible. Not recent, but not decades old either. She had written this later. Perhaps when she knew her time was running out. My eyes moved across the first line. If you are reading this, then the truth has already begun to find you. My breath caught. She knew. She knew it would happen this way. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. I spent my entire life trying to protect you from something I was never strong enough to face myself. I pressed my lips together, my chest tightening with each word. You deserve to know who you are. But I was afraid of what that truth might take from you. A tear slipped down my cheek. Afraid. Not ashamed, not careless. Afraid. I continued reading. Your father was not the man whose name you carry. The words hit harder than anything else. Final. Unavoidable. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the truth settle fully this time. No more doubt. No more questioning. Just reality. When I opened them again, I read the next line. His name was Charles Whitaker. The room felt still, silent, like everything had paused to let that truth land. And in that moment, I realized something even more profound. This wasn't just about discovering who my father was. It was about understanding why my mother had been willing to carry this secret for an entire lifetime. I couldn't speak right away. The letter trembled in my hands, not because it was fragile, but because I was. My entire life, I whispered, my voice barely forming the words. It was all built on something that wasn't real. Michael didn't interrupt. He stood a few steps behind me, giving me the silence I needed to let the truth settle. Not forcefully, not suddenly, but slowly, like a weight that sinks into your chest and refuses to move. I read the letter again. If you are reading this, then the truth has already begun to find you. My mother had known. She had known that one day something would break through the carefully constructed life she had built around me, that the truth wouldn't stay buried forever. And yet she still chose to hide it. I don't understand, I said, my voice breaking slightly. Why would she do this? Why would she let me live my entire life without knowing who I really am? Michael stepped closer, his voice gentle but grounded. She didn't hide it because it didn't matter, he said. She hid it because it mattered too much. I shook my head. That doesn't make it right. No, he agreed quietly. It doesn't. That honesty surprised me. He wasn't trying to defend her. He wasn't trying to soften the truth. He was just acknowledging it. I appreciated that more than I expected. I wiped my eyes quickly and looked back down into the box. The journal. The small case. More pieces of a story I hadn't known existed. I reached for the journal next. It was heavier than I expected, the leather worn but intact. My fingers brushed over the cover, and for a moment I hesitated again. How much more is there? I asked softly. Michael didn't answer. He didn't need to. I opened the journal. The first few pages were filled with dates, not daily entries, just moments, important ones, snapshots of a life that had been carefully recorded but never shared. My eyes moved across the first entry. March 3rd, 1956. I met him today. My breath caught. Him. Charles. I kept reading. He wasn't like anyone I've ever known. He listened, truly listened, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I could be someone other than who they expect me to be. I swallowed hard. This wasn't just a hidden relationship. This was love. Real love. I turned the page. June 18th, 1956. They found out. My chest tightened instantly. They said I was ruining everything, that I didn't understand what I was risking, that he wasn't appropriate. Appropriate. The word felt cold, clinical, like a decision made by people who valued control more than happiness. They told me I would lose everything if I continued. My home, my name, my future. I closed my eyes briefly. So, that was it. Pressure, control, fear. I opened them again and kept reading. August 2nd, 1957. The baby is coming. My heart skipped. That child deserves better than the life they are planning for us, but I don't know how to give it to them. I pressed my hand against my chest, trying to steady my breathing. She wrote about me, I whispered. Michael nodded slightly. She did. I turned the page with shaking hands. August 3rd, 1957. Josephine was born today. The words blurred instantly through my tears. She's perfect. The entry continued. And I am terrified. Terrified, not of me, but for me. I kept reading. They have already decided. They say Robert will raise her, that it's the only way to protect her from the consequences of my choices. I froze. Robert. My father. No, not my father. Not in the way I had believed. They said Charles must leave, that he cannot be part of this, that if he stays, everything will fall apart. My hands clenched around the edges of the journal. They took that choice away from both of us. I couldn't breathe for a moment. This wasn't just a secret. This was a decision made by people who had rewritten my entire life before I even had a chance to live it. I flipped forward, searching for something, anything that explained what happened next. The entries became less frequent, more scattered, but the tone it changed, less hopeful, more resigned. October 12th, 1957. Charles is gone. My throat tightened painfully. They told me it was for the best, that he would move on, that Josephine would never know the difference. A tear slid down my cheek. They were wrong. I whispered it without thinking. Because now I did know. And the difference felt like everything. I closed the journal slowly, my hands no longer steady. The room felt smaller now, heavier, as if the truth had taken up space that had once been empty. I wasn't just lied to. I said, my voice low and trembling. My life was arranged. Michael didn't deny it. No, he said quietly. It was. I looked at him, then really looked at him. And your family? I asked. What do they know about Charles? He exhaled slowly, his expression shifting less controlled, now more personal. My father always said Charles disappeared, he admitted. No explanation, no records. Just gone. I felt something twist inside me. They didn't know about me, I said. No, he said. They didn't. Silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't just heavy. It was shared. 2 lives. 2 histories. Connected by a man neither of us had known. I looked back down at the box. One more thing, I said softly. The small case. It had been sitting there the entire time waiting. I reached for it slowly, my fingers brushing against its smooth surface. It was locked. Of course it was. I let out a quiet breath. Do you think this is the last piece? I asked. Michael stepped closer, his voice steady. I think, he said, this might be the part your mother couldn't bring herself to write down. I looked at the case again, closed, silent, holding something that had been hidden longer than anything else. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something different. Not just fear, not just confusion, but resolve. Because whatever was inside that case, it wasn't going to stay hidden anymore. The small case felt heavier than it looked. I held it in both hands, turning it slightly, studying every edge, like it might reveal something before I even opened it. It was simple, dark, rectangular, with a small metal latch at the front. No markings, no label, just sealed. How do we open it? I asked quietly. Michael stepped closer, his eyes narrowing slightly as he examined it. It doesn't look like it needs a key, he said, more like a latch mechanism. I nodded my thumb, brushing against the small clasp. For a moment, I didn't move, because this felt different from everything else. The letter had been words, the journal had been memories, but this was something my mother had locked away, something she hadn't trusted even paper to hold. You don't have to do this right now, Michael said gently. We can take it with us. Open it when you're ready. I shook my head. No, I said more firmly than I expected. If I walk away from this now, I might not come back to it. He didn't argue. He just stepped back again, giving me the space to decide. I took a slow breath. Then I pressed the latch. There was a soft click. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the quiet room. I froze for a second, my heart pounding in my chest. Then slowly, I opened the case. Inside, there were only 2 things: a photograph and a small folded document. I stared at them, my breath catching, as something deep inside me shifted again. Start with the photograph, Michael said quietly. I nodded. My hands trembled slightly as I reached in and picked it up. The edges were worn, the colors faded with time, but the image was still clear. 3 people. A young woman, a man, and a baby. My chest tightened instantly. The woman, I knew her. Even younger, even softer in her features, I recognized her immediately. Eleanor, my mother. But the man standing beside her, I had never seen him before. He was tall, well-dressed, his arm resting gently around her shoulders. There was something about his expression, calm, confident, but with a quiet warmth in his eyes. Charles Whitaker. It had to be. I swallowed hard, my eyes drifting to the baby in Eleanor's arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, small, fragile, unaware. "That's me," I whispered. Michael leaned in slightly, studying the photograph. "It looks like it," he said softly. But it wasn't just the fact that it was me. It was the way they were looking at each other. Eleanor and Charles. There was no fear in that moment. No pressure. No separation. Just love. Real, undeniable love. "They were happy," I said, my voice breaking slightly. Michael nodded. "Yes," he said, "they were." I held the photograph tighter, as if it might slip away if I didn't. "This was before everything changed," I murmured. "Before they were told what they could and couldn't be. Before my life was decided for me." I placed the photograph carefully on the table, my fingers lingering on it for just a second longer than necessary. Then I reached for the folded document. It was thicker than the letter, more formal, official. My stomach tightened as I unfolded it. The first thing I saw was a heading. Adoption record. My breath stopped. "No," I whispered. I scanned the page quickly, my eyes racing over the words. Legal language. Dates. Signatures. And then, the names. Child. Josephine Emerson. Biological mother, Eleanor Emerson. Biological father, Charles Whitaker. Adoptive father, Robert Emerson. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. "Adoptive," I whispered the word, catching in my throat. "Adoptive." Father Michael moved closer, his voice calm but urgent. "Josephine, I wasn't just raised by Robert," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I was given to him." The words felt sharp, too sharp, like they cut deeper the more I said them out loud. "They arranged this." I continued, my breathing uneven now. "They decided that Charles couldn't be part of my life, and they replaced him." Michael didn't interrupt. He just stood there, letting me feel it, letting me process it. "They turned my father into a stranger," I said, "and they turned a stranger into my father." The silence that followed was overwhelming because there was no argument against it, no softer way to say it. This was the truth, and it was brutal in its simplicity. I looked back down at the document, forcing myself to read more carefully this time. There were signatures at the bottom, Eleanor's, Robert's, and another name, a judge, official, final. "This wasn't a mistake," I said quietly. "This was planned." Michael nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "it was." I felt something shift inside me again. Not confusion this time, not even pain. Something sharper, something clearer. Anger. Not loud, not explosive, but steady, controlled. "How could she do this?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my effort to keep it steady. How could my mother look at me every day and never tell me who I really was? Michael hesitated. "She thought she was protecting you," he said. I shook my head immediately. From what I demanded. The truth. My own father. "From losing you," he said, quietly. That stopped me. I looked at him, my anger faltering just slightly. "What do you mean?" He gestured gently toward the journal. "She wrote that they threatened her," he said. that she could lose everything if she didn't comply. I swallowed. They would have taken me away. It's possible, he said. In those days, things like this weren't handled gently. Reputation mattered. Control mattered. I looked back down at the document again, at the signatures, at the finality of it. So she chose this, I said slowly. She chose to let me grow up believing something that wasn't true so she wouldn't lose me completely. Michael didn't answer, because there was nothing to add. I closed the document carefully, my hands steadier now. Not because I felt better, but because something inside me had settled. The truth was no longer a question. It was a fact. And facts don't change. I picked up the photograph again, looking at it with new eyes. Charles Whitaker, my father. Not a name in a letter, not a possibility, a fact. And suddenly, another thought pushed its way to the surface. If he was forced to leave? I said slowly, then what happened to him? Michael's expression shifted slightly. That he said is something we still don't know. I nodded, because for the first time since this began, I realized the truth didn't end here. This wasn't the conclusion. It was just the beginning. Because somewhere out there was a man who had been erased from my life, and I needed to know what became of him. We didn't leave the bank right away. I sat there, staring at the photograph and the adoption document spread out on the small table, as if looking at them long enough might somehow make them feel less real. But they didn't. If anything, the longer I looked, the sharper the truth became. I need to find him, I said finally. My voice was quiet but certain. Michael didn't seem surprised. I was hoping you'd say that, he replied. I glanced up at him. Why? Because I've been looking for him too, he said. That caught my attention. You have? He nodded, pulling out his phone, then hesitating before continuing. My father spent years trying to track Charles Whitaker, he explained, but the trail always went cold after 1957. My stomach tightened. The same year I was born, I said. Yes. That wasn't a coincidence. That was the moment everything changed. What happened after that? I asked. Michael exhaled slowly. There were a few scattered records, he said. A temporary address in Ohio, a short-term job in Pennsylvania. Then nothing. Nothing, I repeated. Like he disappeared, he said. I looked back down at the photograph. Charles Whitaker. A man who had once held me in his arms, erased. He didn't disappear, I said quietly. He was forced out. Michael didn't argue, because we both knew it was true. I carefully gathered the items, the photograph, the adoption document, the letter, and placed them back into the case. Then I held it tightly against my chest. This isn't over, I said. Michael nodded. No, he said. It's not. We left the bank shortly after. The sunlight outside felt too bright, almost harsh against the weight of what we had just uncovered. The world continued around us, cars, passing people, walking normal life unfolding, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. In the car, I held the case in my lap, my fingers resting lightly on top of it. What's our first step? I asked. Michael started the engine, his expression focused. We start with what we know, he said. Names, dates, locations. I nodded. Ohio, I said. Pennsylvania. And 1957, he added. I leaned back in the seat, my mind already racing ahead. We should check public records, I said. Employment, housing, anything that might have left a trace. Michael glanced at me briefly, a faint smile touching his lips. You're good at this, he said. I shook my head slightly. I'm not, I replied. I'm just motivated. Michael glanced at me briefly, a faint smile touching his lips. You're good at this, he said. I shook my head slightly. I'm not, I replied. I'm just motivated. That was the truth. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was personal. We drove in silence for a while before Michael spoke again. There's something else, he said. I turned to him. What my father believed Charles had family, he said. Not just Eleanor, extended family, but he never found them. I frowned slightly. Why not? Because the name Whitaker wasn't consistent, he explained. It appeared in some records, but not others. I felt a chill run through me. You think he changed his name? It's possible, Michael said, especially if he was trying to start over. Start over? The words felt heavy. If he changed his name? I said slowly, then finding him is going to be harder than we thought. Michael nodded. Yes, but not impossible. I looked out the window watching the passing streets blur together. Somewhere out there was a man who had been forced to walk away from his own child, and he had lived the rest of his life carrying that absence. Did he ever try to come back? Did he ever look for me? Or had he been told, just like my mother, that it was better to let go? The thought made my chest ache. We need more than records, I said suddenly. Michael glanced at me. What do you mean? I turned back to him. We need people, I said. Someone who knew him. Someone who remembers. Michael considered that. That's going to be difficult after all this time, he said. Not impossible, I replied. Because something inside me had shifted again. I wasn't just following clues anymore. I was chasing a connection. And connections leave traces. Do you still have access to your father's research? I asked. Michael nodded. Yes, all of it. Then that's where we start, I said. Everything he found. Everything he couldn't explain. He gave a small nod. All right. We drove back to his place. A modest house on the edge of town, quiet and organized in a way that reflected him perfectly. Inside, he led me to a small office. Stacks of files lined the shelves, each one carefully labeled. This is it, he said. Everything my father collected. I stepped inside, slowly taking it all in. This wasn't just research. This was a lifetime of questions. And now they were mine too. Michael pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the desk. Whitaker, he said. I took a deep breath. Then I opened it. Inside were documents, photographs, notes, pieces of a puzzle that had never quite come together. Until now. I began sorting through them, my hands moving faster as I recognized patterns, addresses, dates, names that appeared more than once. And then, something caught my eye. A photograph. Not old like the one from the case. More recent. A man. Older now, his hair grayer, his face lined with time, but there was something about him that felt familiar. My heart began to race. I picked it up slowly. Michael, I said, my voice barely steady. Where did this come from? He stepped closer, looking over my shoulder. That, he said. That was taken in 1985. My father found it in a local newspaper archive. I stared at the man in the photo, the eyes, the expression. Even after all those years, I could see it. This is him, I whispered. Michael didn't hesitate. Yes, he said. I believe it is. I swallowed hard. He didn't disappear, I said. No, Michael agreed. He kept living. I continued. He built a life somewhere. And now Michael said, his voice steady. We just have to find where. I held the photograph tighter, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and something else. Hope. Because for the first time since this began, Charles Whitaker wasn't just a name in the past. He was a man who had existed beyond it, and that meant he might still be out there. I didn't expect the next clue to come so quickly, but sometimes when the truth has been buried for decades, once it starts to surface, it doesn't stop. I sat at Michael's desk, the photograph still in my hand, studying every detail as if I could pull answers straight from it. The man in the picture, my father, looked older than in the first photograph. His posture was slightly different, more reserved, more cautious. But his eyes, they were the same. Soft, observant, carrying something unspoken. What newspaper was this from? I asked. Michael leaned over and pulled a folder closer. Pittsburgh Gazette, he said. Local archive. My father had a contact there who helped him access older records. Pittsburgh, I repeated softly. That matched one of the places Michael had mentioned earlier. Pennsylvania. I placed the photograph down carefully and began flipping through the rest of the file. There were clippings, short mentions. Nothing obvious at first, just small references to community events, local business listings, minor interviews. Until I found it. A headline. Local carpenter helps restore historic church. My breath caught. Michael, I said, my voice tightening slightly. Look at this. He stepped closer. What is it? I pointed at the article. It's him, I said. The photograph attached to the article showed the same man, older now, maybe in his late 50s. His hair had thinned slightly, his face lined with time, but there was no mistaking him. Charles Whitaker. Except, that's not the same name Michael said. I looked closer. He was right. The article didn't say Charles Whitaker. It said Daniel Harper. I felt a chill run through me. He changed his name, I whispered. Michael nodded slowly. That explains why my father couldn't track him, he said. He wasn't looking for the right name. I stared at the article, my heart beginning to pound again. Daniel Harper. A man who rebuilt his life under a different identity. A man who stayed hidden, or was made to stay hidden. Read it, Michael said quietly. I nodded and began scanning the article more carefully. Daniel Harper, a skilled carpenter with over 30 years of experience, has played a key role in restoring several historic buildings in the Pittsburgh area. 30 years. That meant he had started working there shortly after 1957, after he disappeared, after he was forced out of my life. He didn't just survive, I said softly. He built something. Michael crossed his arms, slightly thinking. And he stayed in one place, he added. That makes him easier to find. I kept reading. Known for his quiet dedication and strong work ethic, Harper has become a respected figure in the local community. Respected, stable, present, everything I never had the chance to know. There's no mention of family, I said, my voice tightening again. Michael leaned in slightly. Look at the bottom, he said. I followed his gaze. A small line, almost easy to miss. Harper lives alone and has no known immediate family. I felt something twist sharply in my chest. No known immediate family. That was how the world saw him. A man without roots, without connection, without me. He lived his whole life like I didn't exist. I whispered. Michael shook his head gently. No, he said. He lived his whole life like he wasn't allowed to exist for you. That landed differently. Not absence, but separation. not choice, but force. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady the wave of emotion rising inside me. He didn't leave me. He was taken away. And he stayed away. Because he believed he had to. "We have to go to Pittsburgh," I said suddenly. Michael didn't hesitate. "I agree." I opened my eyes again, my decision already made. If he stayed there, if he built a life there, I continued, then someone must remember him. Michael nodded. Neighbors, co-workers, anyone connected to those restoration projects. I stood up, my energy shifting completely now. No more hesitation, no more uncertainty, just direction. "We're not just looking for records anymore," I said. "We're looking for people who knew him." Michael grabbed his keys without another word. "I'll drive," he said. The trip to Pittsburgh took a few hours, long enough for my thoughts to spiral and settle and spiral again. I stared out the window, watching the landscape shift as we moved further away from everything I had known, closer to something I had never had. "What if he's not there anymore?" I asked quietly. Michael glanced at me briefly. "Then we find out where he went," he said. "And if he's gone," I pressed. He didn't answer immediately, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. We would still find something, because people don't just disappear completely. They leave behind pieces, memories, traces. We arrived in the late afternoon. Pittsburgh felt different from where I lived, older in some places, more worn but filled with history. We started with the church mentioned in the article. It stood quietly on a corner street, its structure solid but clearly aged. The kind of building that had seen generations come and go. "This is it," Michael said. I nodded, my chest tightening again. We walked inside. The air was still filled with that familiar scent of old wood and quiet reflection. A man stood near the front, arranging something on a table. He looked up as we approached. "Can I help you?" he asked kindly. I hesitated for a moment, then I stepped forward. "I hope so," I said. "I'm looking for someone who used to work here, a carpenter." He smiled slightly. "We've had a few over the years," he said. "Do you have a name?" I swallowed. "Daniel Harper." The man's expression changed immediately. Recognition. Clear. Immediate. "Oh," he said. "Daniel." My heart skipped. "You knew him?" I asked. He nodded. "Of course," he said. "Everyone here knew Daniel." I felt my breath catch. Finally, a connection. "He helped restore this place," the man continued. "Spent years working on it. Quiet man. Kept to himself mostly, but he cared. You could see it in his work." I stepped closer. "Is he still here?" I asked, my voice barely steady. The man hesitated, and in that hesitation, I felt it. Something wasn't right. "He hasn't been around for a while," the man said slowly. My heart sank. "What do you mean?" I asked. The man sighed softly. "Daniel retired a few years back," he said. "Moved out of town as far as I know." "Moved. Gone again." The pattern repeated. "Do you know where he went?" I asked quickly. The man shook his head. "No," he said. "But—" He paused. "But what?" I pressed. "He left something behind," the man said. "Asked me to hold on to it. Said someone might come looking one day." My breath stopped. "Someone like me," I whispered. The man studied my face carefully, then nodded. "Yes," he said. And just like that, I realized something that sent a chill through my entire body. My father had been waiting. For a moment, I couldn't move. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even shock anymore. It was something deeper. Something that felt like standing at the edge of a moment that had been waiting for me long before I even knew it existed. He left something. I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded. Yes, he said. He was very specific about it. Told me to keep it safe. Said one day someone might come asking about him. My throat tightened. What did he say about that person, I asked. The man studied me carefully now, as if trying to match something in his memory to what he saw in front of him. He said the man replied slowly that she might not believe everything at first, that she might be angry, confused, but that she deserved the truth anyway. My eyes burned. He said I asked. The man nodded again. Yes. There was no doubt anymore. No uncertainty. My father had known. Not just that someone might come, that I might come. How long ago did he leave this? Michael asked gently. The man thought for a moment. About 5 years ago, he said. Maybe a little more, 5 years. I swallowed hard. That wasn't long ago, not in the grand scope of a lifetime. Is he? I hesitated, forcing myself to ask the question I wasn't ready to hear the answer to. Is he still alive? The man's expression softened. I don't know, he said honestly. He didn't say where he was going, just that he needed to finish something before he left. Finish something. The words echoed in my mind. What did that mean? And why did it feel like it had something to do with me? Can I see it? I asked quietly. The man nodded. Of course. He turned and walked toward a small office near the back of the church. Michael and I followed my steps slower now, more deliberate. Every part of me felt alert, present, as if I couldn't afford to miss even the smallest detail. The man opened a drawer and carefully pulled out a small wooden box. Not ornate, not expensive, but well cared for. He placed it gently on the desk. This is what he left, he said. My heart began to race again. Another box, another piece of a life that had been hidden from me. But this one wasn't hidden by my mother. It was left for me by my father. I stepped closer. Did he say anything else, I asked? The man hesitated. Just one thing he said. I looked up at him. He said, if she comes, tell her I never stopped thinking about her. The words hit harder than anything else. Not a document, not a photograph, a feeling, a truth. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting it sink in. All those years, all that distance. And still, he thought about me. I reached out slowly and touched the box. It was warm from the room's smooth H beneath my fingers. Take your time. All those years, all that distance. And still, he thought about me. I reached out slowly and touched the box. It was warm from the room's smooth beneath my fingers. Take your time, the man said gently. Michael stepped back again, giving me space. I appreciated that more than I could say. Because this moment, this wasn't just about discovery. It was about connection. I opened the box carefully. Inside, there were several items. A stack of letters, a small, worn photograph, and something else, a Bible. My breath caught immediately. Not just any Bible. It looked familiar, different from the one my family had sold, but similar in age, in wear, in presence. He had one too, I whispered. Michael stepped closer, his voice low. "It looks like it," he said. I reached for the photograph first. It showed a man sitting on a wooden bench, older now, his hair mostly gray, his posture slightly bent with age, but his eyes. Even in that still image, they carried something unmistakable. Loneliness and hope. "He kept a photo of himself," I murmured. The man shook his head slightly. "That was taken by someone else," he said. "A friend of his. He didn't like having his picture taken much." I nodded, holding the photograph carefully. Then I set it aside and reached for the letters. They were tied together with a simple string. My hands trembled as I untied it. "What are these?" I asked softly. The man looked at them for a moment. "He said they were for you," he replied. My heart skipped. "For me?" He nodded. "Yes." I swallowed hard and picked up the first letter. The envelope was unsealed, the paper inside slightly worn. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but steady, strong. "Josephine," it began. My breath caught instantly. "I don't know if this letter will ever reach you. I don't know if you'll ever know who I am. But if you do, if somehow this finds its way to you, I need you to know something." My vision blurred. I didn't leave because I wanted to. The words hit me like a wave. I left because I was told that staying would destroy your future. And I believed them. I believed that loving you from a distance was better than risking everything you might lose if I stayed. A tear slipped down my cheek. All those years, all those unanswered questions. I tried to come back once the letter continued. "But they made it clear that I would never be allowed near you, that you had a life already decided, a name already given." I closed my eyes briefly, because now it all made sense. They told me you would grow up safe, that you would have everything you needed. So I stayed away, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. My hands trembled. He didn't abandon me. He sacrificed himself. I watched from a distance when I could. Not close enough to be seen, but close enough to know you were there, that you were okay. I pressed the letter to my chest for a moment, trying to contain the emotion rising inside me. "You were never forgotten," the final line read. Not for a single day. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. They came quietly, steadily, not overwhelming, but deep. Real. "I was never forgotten," I whispered. Michael placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "No," he said softly. "You weren't." I looked down at the rest of the letters. How many had he written? How many things had he wanted to say, but never could? And suddenly, I understood something that changed everything again. This wasn't just about finding him anymore. This was about understanding him, about hearing his voice, even if it came years too late. I didn't realize how long I stood there, holding that first letter. Time seemed to lose its shape inside that small office. The world outside the church, the city, everything felt distant, almost unreal. All that existed in that moment was his voice. Not spoken, but written. Waiting. "I should keep going," I said quietly. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Michael nodded gently. "I'm here," he said. I took a breath and reached for the next letter. There were so many of them, different envelopes, different dates scribbled faintly in the corners. Some looked older than others, their edges softened by time. How many years had he spent writing to someone he wasn't allowed to see? I unfolded the second letter. Josephine, it began again. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. Today I saw you from across the street. My heart stopped. I read it again. I saw you from across the street. My fingers tightened around the paper. You were about 10 years old. You were laughing. I don't know what made you laugh, but I stood there longer than I should have just to hear it again. Tears blurred the words instantly. He had seen me, not just once, but at least this time. I wanted to walk over. I wanted to say your name. I wanted to tell you who I was. But I remembered what they said, and I couldn't risk taking that life away from you. I closed my eyes, a wave of emotion rising inside me. All those years, I thought I was alone in my life. He had been there, just out of reach. I hope the man raising you is kind, the letter continued. I hope he gives you the stability I was never allowed to provide. I hope you never feel the absence of what you've been denied. A quiet, aching breath escaped me. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He was hopeful. For me. Always for me. I lowered the letter slowly, pressing it gently against the desk. He saw me, I whispered. Michael's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. I know, he said softly. I shook my head slightly. I didn't even know he existed, I said. And he was standing there watching me grow up. Michael's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. I know, he said softly. I shook my head slightly. I didn't even know he existed, I said. And he was standing there watching me grow up. The thought didn't feel invasive. It felt heartbreaking, because he hadn't been watching out of curiosity. He had been watching because that was all he was allowed to do. I reached for another letter. My hands moved faster now, my need to understand outweighing the fear of what I might feel. This one looked newer, the paper less worn. I unfolded it carefully. Josephine, it read again. If you are reading this, then something has changed. Maybe the truth has finally found its way to you. I exhaled slowly. It had. I have spent most of my life wondering if I made the right decision. Not the decision to love you, that was never a question, but the decision to stay away. My chest tightened. Every year, I told myself the same thing, that you were safe, that you were cared for, that you had a life I could never give you. I swallowed hard. Maybe I was wrong. The letter continued. Maybe I should have fought harder. Maybe I should have risked everything to be part of your life. The honesty in those words hit me differently. Not perfect, not heroic, just real. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for not being there, he wrote, but I hope you'll understand that every choice I made because I loved you. A tear slid down my cheek. I believe him, I whispered. Michael nodded. I think you do, he said. I placed the letter down carefully and looked at the rest. There were more, so many more. Each one a piece of a life lived in silence. Each one a moment he couldn't share except like this. But then something else caught my attention. At the bottom of the box, beneath the letters, there was a smaller envelope, different from the others, thicker, sealed. My name wasn't written on it. Instead, there was a single word. Final. My breath caught. I reached for it slowly. This one's different, I said. Michael leaned in slightly. Do you want to open it? He asked. I hesitated, because something about it felt heavier. Not physically, but emotionally. Like whatever was inside this envelope wasn't just another piece of the past. It was the end of something, or the beginning. I have to, I said quietly. I broke the seal carefully, my fingers trembling just slightly. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a smaller card. I unfolded the paper first. Josephine, it began. If you've made it this far, then you know the truth. And if you know the truth, then I owe you one last thing. My heart began to race. I am not where you think I am. I froze. Not where I think he is. I left Pittsburgh years ago. Not because I wanted to disappear, but because I needed to make sure that when you found me, it would be on my terms, not theirs. I am not where you think I am. I froze. Not where I think he is. I left Pittsburgh years ago. Not because I wanted to disappear, but because I needed to make sure that when you found me, it would be on my terms, not theirs. Theirs. The people who had taken him away. The people who had shaped my life without asking. I didn't want you to walk into a past that could still hurt you. I needed to make sure it was safe for you to know everything. Safe. Even now, he was thinking about protecting me. I am still alive. The letter continued. My breath caught sharply. Alive. Yes, alive, I whispered. Michael's eyes widened slightly. That's what it says. Even now, he was thinking about protecting me. I am still alive, the letter continued. My breath caught sharply. Alive. He's alive, I whispered. Michael's eyes widened slightly. That's what it says? I nodded, unable to look away from the page. I am still alive. I repeated softly. The words didn't feel real, but they were. Clear. Undeniable. I have been living quietly, not far from where it all began. If you want to find me, you can. My heart pounded louder now. Faster. Stronger. If you choose not to, I will understand. You have every right to live your life without reopening old wounds. I shook my head slightly. No, that wasn't an option anymore. But if you do come, I will be waiting. Waiting. The word echoed through me. All these years, and he was still waiting. I lowered the letter slowly, my hands no longer trembling, but steady. Certain. I'm going, I said. Michael didn't question it. I know he said. I picked up the small card that had been inside the envelope. There was an address written on it. Simple, clear, a small town. Closer than I expected. Much closer. I stared at it, my heart racing with something I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. Not just curiosity, not just determination, but something deeper. Hope. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just searching for the truth. I was about to meet it. I don't remember leaving the church. One moment, I was standing there holding the letter that confirmed my father was alive. And the next, I was in the passenger seat of Michael's car, the address clutched tightly in my hand. Are you sure you want to go now? Michael asked gently. His voice cut through the noise in my head just enough for me to focus. I looked down at the card again. A small town, less than an hour away. So close, too close. I've waited my whole life without knowing it, I said quietly. I don't think I can wait another day. Not when I finally know where he is. Michael nodded. All right, he said. We go now. The drive felt different this time. Before, every mile had been filled with questions. Now, every mile brought me closer to answers. And somehow, that felt even more terrifying. I stared out the window, watching the scenery shift into something quieter. Fewer buildings, more open land, roads that felt less traveled. This is where he chose to be. I stared out the window, watching the scenery shift into something quieter. Fewer buildings, more open land, roads that felt less traveled. This is where he chose to be, I murmured. Michael glanced at me briefly. Looks like it, he said. I tightened my grip on the address. Why here? Why somewhere so quiet, so hidden? And then I remembered his words. I needed to make sure it was safe for you to know everything. This wasn't hiding. This was waiting. The closer we got, the harder it became to breathe normally. Every turn felt heavier. Every passing street sign made my heart beat faster. What if I started then stopped? Michael waited. What if he doesn't want to see me? I finished quietly. The question hung in the air, because for the first time, I allowed myself to consider it. All those letters, all those years. But what if when it finally came time, he chose not to open that door? Michael slowed the car slightly, his voice steady. Then we respect that, he said. But from everything you've read, does that sound like the man who wrote those letters? I shook my head slowly. No, I admitted. He hadn't written those words like someone who wanted distance. He had written them like someone who had been forced to live with it. I think he's been waiting for this, Michael said. I looked down at the letter again. I will be waiting. My chest tightened. I think so too, I whispered. We turned onto a narrow road lined with old trees, the kind of road that felt like it hadn't changed much in decades. At the end of it, there was a small house, simple, white paint slightly worn with time, a front porch, a wooden bench. My breath caught. Is that it? Michael asked. I nodded slowly. That's the address. He pulled the car to a stop a short distance away. Neither of us moved right away, because this was the moment. Everything that had been hidden, everything that had been lost, everything that had been waiting, it all led here. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Michael turned to me. You don't have to have the right words, he said. You just have to be honest. Honest after a lifetime of secrets. That felt right. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for the door handle. Wait, Michael said gently. I paused. What if he's not alone? He asked. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? He built a life, Michael said. There could be other people, a wife, children, a whole world that existed without me. The thought hit harder than I expected. Another family, another version of his life, one where I didn't exist. Or worse, one where I was a secret. Again. I swallowed hard. I guess I'll find out, I said, because there was no turning back now. I stepped out of the car. The air felt still, quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Each step toward the house felt heavier than the last. The gravel beneath my shoes crunched softly, the only sound breaking the silence. I reached the front porch, stopped, stared at the door. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure anyone inside could hear it. This was it. After all these years, after all those letters, After all that waiting, I raised my hand and knocked. The sound echoed through the quiet house. Once, twice, then silence. I held my breath. Seconds passed, then footsteps. Slow, measured, approaching. My chest tightened so sharply it almost hurt. The door handle turned, and then the door opened. A man stood there, older, his hair fully gray now, his shoulders slightly bent with age. But his eyes? My breath caught instantly. Those eyes. I knew them. I had seen them in photographs, in letters, in a version of myself I had never understood until now. He looked at me, confused at first, careful, studying my face the same way I was studying his. Neither of us spoke, because somehow words felt too small for this moment. His gaze shifted slightly, something changing in his expression. Recognition. Not from memory, but from something deeper, something instinctive. Josephine, he said. My name, from his lips, for the first time. Everything inside me broke at once. Yes, I whispered. His hand gripped the edge of the door. His eyes filled instantly. And for a moment, he didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't reach out. Because maybe, just like me, he was afraid this wasn't real. I didn't think. His eyes filled instantly. And for a moment, he didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't reach out. Because maybe, just like me, he was afraid this wasn't real. I didn't think. He started, his voice unsteady. I didn't think I'd actually see you. I felt tears rise in my eyes again. I didn't know you were there, I said. All those years I didn't know. He nodded slowly. I know, he said softly. That was the point. The point. To protect me. To keep me safe. Even if it meant losing me. I read your letters, I said. Something shifted in his expression. You found them, he murmured. Yes. He exhaled slowly, like a weight he had carried for decades had finally been released. I wasn't sure if you ever would, he admitted. I took a small step forward, closer. I'm here now, I said. The words felt simple, but they carried everything. His hand lifted slightly, hesitating in the space between us. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached out and touched my hand. Warm, real, not a memory, not a story, not a letter. Him. I've waited a long time for this, he said quietly. Tears slipped this, he said quietly. Tears slipped to own my cheeks. Me too, I whispered. And in that moment, the years between us didn't disappear. The pain didn't vanish. The truth didn't become easier. But something else happened. Something quieter. Something deeper. The distance on my cheeks. Me too, I whispered. And in that moment, the years between us didn't disappear. The pain didn't vanish. The truth didn't become easier. But something else happened. Something quieter. Something deeper. The distance finally ended. For a long time, neither of us moved. My hand was still in his His fingers, rough, warm, slightly trembling, held mine like he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. And maybe I felt the same, because this moment, it didn't feel real yet. "Can I come in?" I asked softly. The words felt simple, but they carried something much heavier. A question, a boundary, a lifetime of distance condensed into a single step forward. He nodded immediately. "Yes," he said, stepping aside. "Of course." I crossed the threshold slowly. The house was exactly what I expected, and somehow nothing like I imagined at the same time. It was modest, clean, quiet, the kind of place built not for show, but for living. There were no signs of a large family, no scattered belongings, no noise, just stillness. "You live alone," I said, more as a realization than a question. He closed the door behind me. "Yes," he replied. There was no hesitation in his voice, no attempt to soften it, just truth. Michael stepped in quietly behind me, giving us space, but remaining present. "I didn't want to build a life that I couldn't share with you," my father added after a moment. The words hit harder than I expected. "You could have," I said, my voice tightening slightly. "You could have had something." He shook his head gently. "I did have something," he said. "I had you." I looked at him, unsure how to respond, because part of me understood. But another part still carried the weight of everything I had lost. "You didn't have me," I said quietly. "Not really." The words hung in the air between us, not angry, but honest. And honesty, I realized, didn't always come gently. He nodded slowly. "You're right." He admitted. That surprised me. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just accepted it. "I had the idea of you," he continued, "the hope of you, the memory of you." From a distance, he gestured slightly toward a small table near the wall. "Would you like to sit?" he asked. I nodded. We moved to the table. 3 chairs, simple, functional. We sat down slowly, the silence stretching again, but this time it felt different. Not empty, just full. Full of things that needed to be said. Full of things we didn't yet know how to say. "I read your letters," I said again, softer this time. He folded his hands in front of him. "I wondered if you ever would," he replied. "I almost didn't," I admitted. If my family hadn't sold the Bible, I might have never known any of this. At that, something shifted in his expression. A shadow. A flicker of something deeper. "They sold it?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yes." He leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. "I always wondered what would happen to it," he said. "You knew about the Bible?" I asked. He gave a faint, almost sad smile. "I gave it to your mother," he said. My breath caught. "You did?" He nodded. "It was the only thing I had that felt meaningful enough," he explained. "I wanted her to have something that couldn't be taken away easily." I swallowed hard. "It was," I said softly, "until it wasn't." He looked at me carefully. "Your family didn't know what it meant," he said. "No," I replied. "They didn't." There was no bitterness in my voice anymore, just clarity. "They thought it was just an old book," I continued. "Something with no value." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes," he said, "the most important things look ordinary to people who don't understand them." That landed deeper than I expected, because it wasn't just about the Bible. It was about everything, about him, about me, about the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. I almost lost it, I said. His eyes sharpened slightly. What do you mean I bought it back? I said. From the man who found it. Michael shifted slightly beside me. That's how we met, I added. My father glanced at Michael, then back at me. Thank you, he said quietly. Michael nodded. She did most of the work, he replied. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. I didn't even know what I was looking for at first. I turned back to my father. I just felt like I couldn't let it go, I admitted. He studied me for a long moment. Maybe you felt something, he said. I frowned slightly. Something connection, he replied simply. I didn't answer right away, because maybe he was right. Maybe something inside me had recognized it long before my mind understood why. There was a pause, then I leaned forward slightly. There's something I need to ask you, I said. He nodded. Anything? I took a breath. Why didn't you fight harder? I asked. The question came out softer than I expected, but it still carried weight. Years of it. He didn't react immediately. He didn't get defensive. He didn't look away. He just thought. Carefully. Choosing his words. Because I was afraid, he said, finally. I blinked slightly. Afraid I wasn't afraid for myself, he continued. I was afraid for you. I held his gaze. They made it very clear. Because I was afraid, he said finally. I blinked slightly. Afraid, I wasn't afraid for myself, he continued. I was afraid for you. I held his gaze. They made it very clear, he said, his voice steady but heavy, that if I pushed too hard, if I refused to step away, you could be taken somewhere I would never find you again. A chill ran through me. You mean they could have taken me away completely? I asked. He nodded. Yes, the simplicity of that answer made it even harder to process. So you chose to lose me before they could take me, I said slowly. Yes. The word didn't waver, didn't break. It just existed. And suddenly, I understood something that changed everything again. He hadn't chosen absence. He had chosen the only version of presence he was allowed. You protected me, I whispered. He looked down at his hands. I tried, he said. I sat back, letting the weight of that settle inside me. All those years, all that pain, and beneath it, a choice made out of love. Not weakness, not abandonment, love. I was angry, I admitted. He looked up. I know, he said. I thought you left. I continued. I thought you didn't want me. His eyes filled slightly. I never stopped wanting you, he said quietly. The words weren't dramatic. They weren't loud, but they were true. And that truth softened something inside me. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to take the next step. I'm here now, I said again. He nodded slowly. Yes, he said. You are. And this time, when he reached for my hand again, I didn't hesitate. I held on. Not as a stranger, not as a question, but as something real, something that had always existed, even when we couldn't see it. We stayed at that table for a long time, not talking at first, just being there. Two people who had spent a lifetime apart, now sitting across from each other, trying to understand how to exist in the same space. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And somehow, that was enough. I don't know where to begin, I admitted finally. My father gave a small, gentle smile. We don't have to begin anywhere, he said. We're already here. That simple sentence did something to me. It took away the pressure, the need to fix everything, to explain everything, to make up for all the lost years in one conversation. Maybe we didn't have to. Maybe we could just start now. I used to imagine this moment, I said quietly. He looked at me, his eyes soft. What did you imagine? He asked. I hesitated. Honestly, I said. He nodded. I imagined being angry, I admitted. I imagined asking you why you left, why you didn't come back, why you didn't fight harder. His expression didn't change. He just listened. But now I continued, my voice softer, I understand more than I expected to. He let out a slow breath. I was afraid you wouldn't, he said. I was afraid I wouldn't either, I replied. We both smiled slightly at that, a small, quiet understanding passing between us. I missed so much, he said after a moment. The weight in his voice was undeniable. I missed your first steps, your first day of school, your life. I felt a familiar ache in my chest. I missed you too, I said. The words surprised me as they came out, because for so long I hadn't even known there was someone to miss. But now it felt undeniable. There had always been something missing. I just hadn't known what it was. I used to wonder why I always felt disconnected. I admitted, like there was something I couldn't quite understand about myself. He nodded slowly. Sometimes, he said, when something is taken from us before we even know it existed, we still feel the absence. That made sense. More sense than anything else had. It wasn't just about knowing the truth, I said. It was about feeling it. He looked at me carefully, and now he asked. I thought about it. Everything that had happened, everything I had learned, everything I had felt. I feel whole, I said quietly. The word hung between us. Not perfect, not complete, but closer than I had ever been. His eyes filled slightly, but he didn't look away. That's all I ever wanted, he said. Silence settled again, but this time it felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain, just peaceful. After a while, Michael stood up slowly. We'll give you two some time. Silence settled again, but this time it felt different. Not heavy, not uncertain, just peaceful. After a while, Michael stood up slowly. We'll give you two some time, he said. I looked up at him. Thank you, I said, for everything. He nodded. You found your way here, he said. I just helped a little. He stepped outside, leaving the door slightly open behind him. And just like that, it was just the two of us, father and daughter. No distance, no secrets, no barriers. I don't know what happens next, I said. He smiled gently. We take it one day at a time, he said. I nodded. That felt right. I'd like to come back, I added. His expression softened even more. I'd like that, he said. I stood up slowly. So did he. There was a moment of hesitation. Then he opened his arms, not wide, not dramatic, just enough. An invitation, a question. I didn't hesitate. I stepped forward, and I hugged him. For the first time in my life. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't practiced. It was unfamiliar. But it was real. And in that moment, everything else faded. The years, the distance, the pain, all of it just softened. "I'm here," I whispered. His arms tightened slightly around me. "I know," he said. We pulled apart slowly, neither of us rushing, neither of us wanting to break the moment too quickly. "I should go?" I said quietly. He nodded. "But you come back," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said, "I will." And this time, I meant it. As I walked back toward the car, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not confusion, not loss, but clarity. A sense that something had finally been put back where it belonged. Michael looked at me as I got in. "Well?" he asked. I smiled softly but genuinely. "I found him," I said. He nodded. "I can see that." We drove away slowly, but this time, I wasn't leaving something behind. I was carrying something forward. A truth, a connection, a beginning. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. Not just Josephine Emerson, but Josephine, daughter of Charles Whitaker. And that truth was finally mine. After everything Josephine went through, her story reminds us of something deeply human. Truth has a way of finding us no matter how carefully it is hidden. Sometimes the people we think abandoned us were actually protecting us in ways we couldn't understand at the time. And sometimes the things we lose lead us back to who we truly are. Family is not just about who raised us, but also about the truths that shaped us both, spoken and unspoken. Forgiveness is not about forgetting the past, but about understanding it enough to move forward without letting it define us completely. Josephine didn't just find her father. She found her identity, her missing piece, and a chance to heal something that had been broken long before she even knew it existed. What would you have done in her place? Would you have opened that door? If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I'd love to hear from you. And if you believe stories like this matter, don't forget to like and subscribe, because sometimes the stories we share are the ones that help us understand our own.